excited to welcome you all to the first episode of Beyond the Stack. And it's an honor to have Seth to be my first guest. Seth is not only an inspiring leader in the industry, but he is definitely one of the most humble personality that I've come across. And welcome, Seth.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Excited to be here for the kickoff.
I'm excited to have you. Seth, could you just give like a little background about yourself, where you began from maybe your studies in college, and then we can climb through?
Yeah, for sure. I had perhaps a not entirely planned journey through life to this point, but I think that's not surprising and just right. So I started off not even thinking about computer science when I was a kid. So I had video games, played with computers a little teeny bit, but I wasn't around them that much. Mm-hmm. And so when I was headed to college in the early 90s, I was actually trying to decide between going to art school in Chicago at the School of Art Institute of Chicago, or doing something that was maybe a little bit less risky. Right. And so less risky in my family of origin, the best example I had to model on was my mom's dad, my granddad. And he was a heart surgeon. And so he never sat me down and said, you have to go become a doctor or become a surgeon. But I think what I took away kind of just ambiently from the environment was looking at friends and family and stuff like that, like who's living life well. And I observed him and I really admired him and I thought he was living life well. And so we tend to model ourselves after examples that look good, right? So I went to college pre-med. So my degree was biochemistry, molecular biology. And but it didn't take me long after getting to college with a computer. And at the time, early high-speed internet, which was kind of brand new. Right. Like the internet only really started to happen like mid-90s. I had access to that early and I fell in love with it and programming. And specifically in connected systems, there was something called IRC, Internet Relay Chat, and you could build scripts, bots, that acted like us in a network. And it's funny because they were so weak. They were just total weak sauce compared to LLMs now, right? And being able to interact with software the way we do with AI right now. But it was maybe like a hint of what was to come, and it sparked me. And so that's what got me headed toward computer science. But it wasn't until late in university that I really locked in on it. And I was taking electives and things like that, but it wasn't part of my core major. Mm-hmm. And I went to the administration in my, like just after my sophomore year, and was like, hey, I think I want to switch to computer science. And I was at the UCs and they were like, sorry, we have a unit limit, too many core units in biochemistry, molecular bio, and computer science, you can't switch. So I was like, well, that's really upsetting. And I thought that door was closed to me, right? So I just finished out my degree, took as many CS courses as I could on the side, and wrapped up. Did the MCAT, but got, like that summer after university, got a programming job as the Internet 1.0 was taking off. And again, just loved it. And just thought, you know what, I'm just going to run with this for a while. And I did. I went back and I talked to my granddad about it. I was like, you know what, I think rather than going to medical school, I want to just go off on this crazy adventure of the Internet, like become a programmer. And I was afraid he was going to be like, what are you doing? But he actually was very supportive, and which is, I think, what, like, for so many reasons, I really I appreciated, without even really understanding it. I just really appreciated who he was as I was a kid growing up, observing him. Mm-hmm. This is just another example of it. He was just really insightful, and he was like, when I got into medicine, it was a very different thing, and so back when I did that, probably would have been a good thing for you to get into, but at this point, not so good a thing. And if I was your age, I'd be doing exactly the same thing as you. So that's what I did. But I think oftentimes in life we think there's like a recipe or a right sequence of steps or right answer.
Right.
But I think that the right answer really is just to, like pay attention to where the spark is, like what things in your life are giving you energy, and move toward those things.
Absolutely. I think that's very well said. You can definitely have a plan, but even sometimes that doesn't work out, right?
Mike Tyson's quote, right?
Right.
Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Right. I want to now kind of transition into your career. You started off as a developer, and then you were a senior application engineer, and then you were at Adobe doing something similar, and slowly you had grown your position in the companies that you sifted through over these years. Going from, like I said, developer till being a manager, being a director, and a VP, and now today, the senior vice president, head of engineering at Udemy, which is one of the leading online learning platforms. How did that come through? What were those pivotal moments that got you here today?
Yeah, that's a good question. If we were sitting down together, even like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, so most of my career was in the Bay Area. And about 9 years ago, my wife and I and our 2 kids moved to Austin, Texas, where we are now, for all the cliche reasons, just like calculus of life stuff. And it's been a great move. But when, like the first 10 years of my career, I was, as we say in our industry, an individual contributor, right? So I was like, when I first moved up to the Bay Area, just this little scrub programmer, right? And just kept chipping away, like building the craft as an individual contributor, up through like Macromedia, Adobe, Skype, Microsoft, some other stuff, to being a principal engineer, right? That first 10 years of my career was really focused on, I told you about shifting into computer science in a little bit of a non-standard way. And so all of us have, I think all the time in life, some amount of imposter syndrome, right? You're in a situation, could be a social situation, could be a work situation, professional, whatever it happens to be. And some part of your brain's like, I don't have enough background or experience or knowledge or skill in this area. So anyways, I definitely felt that in spades, right? The front of my career. And so I was real focused on just building kind of the conceptual and practice and skill-based foundation that I felt like I didn't have, which was not entirely true, but I felt like I didn't have it. And so that was the focus. Once, by the time I was a principal engineer at Microsoft, a decade plus into my career, I had never thought about like managing or leading teams or groups or like working with the executive team at a company on strategy and how all this stuff is going to happen. I was really just focused on kind of like the craft. And I also wasn't I wasn't drawn toward that stuff because it was terrifying. So I grew up, I was really introverted, crazy introverted, very internal. Interaction with people was kind of confusing, scary. And I was not very good at it, or I didn't feel like I was very good at it. And so, oftentimes we also build stories about ourselves, about what we're good at, what we're not good at, that aren't necessarily true stories, but it becomes true because we believe it, or we impose it on ourselves. And oftentimes it takes like external factors to kind of like perturb you, to knock you out of your pattern, right? And so for me in my life, a lot of the changes that have happened, like you described, like through my career, are opportunities to do different things. For me, at least, and this isn't true of everyone, but for me, it's true. I've never, throughout my career, I'm never like looking down the road or kind of obsessing about some other thing to do. I really am just trying to stay present with like what's in front of me, like who am I working with? What are we trying to do right here, right now? Right. And that's generally my main focus. And I really think ultimately, like, across like world religions, philosophies, things like this, like most of the wisdom kind of down through time is like, we have this moment, like us right now, we have this moment. And what happened, like over lunch 2 days ago between us is interesting, but it really doesn't matter. And what might happen for the two of us in 2 months, honestly, it really isn't interesting and doesn't matter, because there's no guarantee whether or not it will happen. And so we have like right now. So what my experience has been in my career is that almost all the changes that have happened in terms of like cool things I've had an opportunity to contribute to and work on, or changes in my role or whatever, has not, like categorically, has not been me asking for it or demanding it. It's just you're part of what's happening, and people around you observe how you're showing up, what you're bringing to it, and maybe they appreciate it, maybe they don't. We don't really have control over that. But I've had like the incredible luck and good fortune of having people that were like around the scenario, around the situation, connected to it, who are further down the road, right? Like managers, other leaders, or things like this, who would kind of just pull me aside and be like, hey, this is great what's happening here, but we really need you to do this thing over here. And then being open to it, right? Being open to when someone else who has more experience, more perspective, is kind of a little bit more zoomed out, a little further down the road from you, when they see opportunities in who you are, what they're observing about you, oftentimes we don't see that in ourselves, right? Like what I see in myself is my story about who I am and what I've done in the past, right? I can't even see myself, right? You probably have a better sense of how I am, how I act, things like this than I do. We can't hear ourselves. Like I have a sense of what my voice is. When you record it and you play it back, you're like, what? True. So like humans in general, we're very unself-aware. When there are people around you that you respect, admire, that you think are good examples of life well lived, when they see something in you that you don't see in yourself and open the door toward an opportunity or a possibility, I think what's happened in my life is more often than not, when that's happened, I've been open to it. And so they'll be like, why don't you do this next? And I'll be like, well, that's outside of my sense of who I am and what I can do, but I'm here for it. I'll try it, and I'll make a ton of mistakes, but I'm also, curious, active learner, want to do better, and great opportunity.
Thank you for sharing those pivotal moments. I want to kind of dive a little deep into your leadership methodologies. I heard you're a huge believer in inputs and outputs. Yeah. Actually, I saw a little snippet of your video online by Amplitude.
Yeah.
So I just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, inputs and outputs. One of the things I think is interesting is like in addition to just being present in the moment with yourself and your teammates and the problem at hand and stuff like this, oftentimes in any like situation or context, and it could be in life or it could be in a product, there are things that are in our control and things that are out of our control, right? So right now, like what's in my control is I could like shake your hand, right? But I can't reach that tree, right? And so I'm always thinking about, in any sort of system, I think it's most useful to think about, okay, what are some of the outcomes or the outputs, the observable changes that could happen in the situation, in the product, that we would like to see happen, right? And then just logically walk back cause effect style. And it's like, well, okay, well, if that output became true, what's the prior step that would have to be true? And walk it back until you get to something that actually is in your control. And what I think is interesting about me and people in general is we all have hopes and dreams for ourselves, each other, our shared efforts, whatever's going on. It's so easy to kind of get lost in like the way far out output and just anchor on that and not really work back logically to like, okay, what are the close in things that I should be doing that like causally or plausibly will influence that output. And that amplitude talk was fun a while ago. So like working in product stuff for a long time, when I started off, I didn't really think this way. Mm-hmm. And also when I started off, this was before cloud, before native, before a lot of things. And so if you wanted to instrument your software and understand how it was being used, you actually couldn't, because you wrote some software like Photoshop, you put it on a CD-ROM, you shipped it to someone. What happened? Who knows? But as stuff moved to cloud and native and more real time and push and everything, what's been really fun for me is that you actually can instrument things and understand like what's working, what's not working. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how little this is used in general across product even today. But when I was at Microsoft and Skype, doing a lot of this stuff, like instrumenting the product to understand, like, okay, where are people figuratively walking in the product? What are they doing in the product? And what are they not doing? And then how do we do more of, how do we do things in the product that influence or lead to outcomes that we want versus not? And then after Microsoft and Skype, like if you're at a company like Microsoft, you're going to basically be building a lot of like platform level web scale things in-house. If you're outside of Microsoft or Google or Meta or whatever, you don't want to build something like behavioral event tracking yourself. And so you use something like Amplitude. And so Amplitude gave me a chance to speak at a conference a few years. And I just walked through kind of this framework that I use for inputs and outputs. Mm-hmm. And the example I gave to make it concrete was, if I want to go run a half marathon with a buddy somewhere, and I want to have like an okay time and not be broken afterwards and like run it in a reasonable time, I could try to become like 2x as fast or as fit, but that's not easy. The easiest thing to do is actually just drop some weight. Yeah. Right. And then if I'm going to drop some weight, like I could wake up every morning, stand on the scale, mm-hmm. look at my weight, and then do a bunch of random action in hopes that it makes me lighter. But that's not useful. So then walk back and it's like, okay, what are some things, like the metric I care about is my weight, but what are some things that I actually have control over that influence that I can actually change? Because my weight's not something I can change very directly. And so the example I gave was like, I can change my caloric intake. I can change my kind of active calorie burn. I can change how I'm sleeping. There are a lot of things that I could work on changing that are inputs to the output of my weight. And I just think that's a really important thing to think about, again, because it's so easy to get anchored on some downstream metric that you care about, like your weight or like the revenue of a company or whatever it happens to be. And those are all important. But what's more important is to like unpack it and walk back logically to like, what are a few of the things that I can do personally or in our product or with a team that are in our direct control, where we can measure and see whether or not that's happening more or less, and then just correlate back.
Would it make sense for me to say that it's a good way to deduce inputs and outputs, essentially cut the noise out and really hone in what the problem is that you're facing? Or
yeah, exactly. Like it's a way to get toward the root cause. Right. Like for a problem or what you're trying to solve, it's the way to get toward the actual root causes. Sorry.
Thank you for explaining inputs and outputs. I think that's a great methodology of getting to the root problem. I want to take a few steps back. And so what I've been noticing in the recent times, especially being a student, I see a lot of my peers believing that after our degree, we're going to go and work at a company, at a big software firm or a tech company, and we're just going to put our heads down and do our programming, and that's about it. I'm sure that's an approach that was not part of your way up to here. Did you ever kind of think about these matters back then, or were you really focused in, this is just about programming? Like, how were you able to really transition your positions of being an engineer to being a manager or a director and on and on?
That's a great question. When I was starting out, right, like I was sharing, coming into computer science, working at Macromedia, Adobe, with all these people that were like bona fide credentialed, right? It's like, oh, here I am working on a team with, oh, this is a guy with like a graduate degree from MIT in computer science, and I'm here with a biochem molecular bio degree, right? And so when I was starting out, like you said, I was really focused, perhaps overly focused, I don't know. I was very focused on what you were describing as kind of like the harder technical skills, right? And if you're working in a technical pursuit, like if you're on a team and you're building software systems, that stuff is super important, and you have to invest in it, right? And so, like the degree you're going through right now, you're building a foundation conceptually and through practice in a bunch of these technical hard skills. But when I think about like how my life, how my career has unfolded, even in the progression of getting from like moving to, and like I said, a lot of the changes in my career weren't things that I was necessarily kind of like demanding or driving for. It was more like I just kept being given these opportunities by, like, looking back, just so much gratitude, these people along my journey that saw me starting to exhibit skills outside of just those purely technical skills, and found ways to put me in a space where I could build those skills, right? And what I mean by those non-technical skills are things like clear communication, collaboration, teamwork, strategy. Also, the last few years, where a lot of my focus is still very much on kind of technical software systems, things like this, but also like organizational design, business acumen, right? Like, how do you build those skills? When should you start building those skills? All of that stuff. I like when I reflect back on my path, I actually, in many ways, I wish I had put, like, if I had a little bit of a do-over, I wish I had paid more attention to those non-technical skills earlier, and been a little bit more intentional about just playing around with them, like finding ways to try them out,
right?
And maybe like one really specific example. And this is important regardless of whether you stay on like a purely technical track, you move into management or move into like other types of leadership, doesn't really matter. This is a skill that's just important across the board no matter what, and it's influence. And so with the skill of influence, this is a hard skill to learn and practice compared to, say, data structures and algorithms, right? Or getting really familiar with DevOps, or mastering OpenAI's latest API surface. Like, the technical stuff is also important, super important, but you can do it, and it's a little bit easier to know whether you've got it or not. Right? Influence is tricky, and influence is a skill that you can work on building no matter what you're doing, right? All the time. And if you start to work on building the skill of influence, the way that you build that, you can start to apply a lot of the same techniques and practices, even subconsciously, to any number of things, like positive communication or whatever. But with influence, like, to do this concretely, what's interesting is to think about this. Like, when you're a kid and you want to influence your parents, do you use one style of influence? No. Like, as a little kid, you might be like, I'm going to ask, and I don't get what I want. Well, okay, what do I do next? I'm going to throw a tantrum. I'm going to break something. Well, that doesn't work. Then I'm going to, and you watch a kid and they're just going through almost like a roster of influence tactics, rapid style. What happens with us as we grow up is, like, in our family of origin, in our teams or systems or whatever we're in, we start to settle on a few styles of influence that feel like they work better than others, but we oftentimes get stuck there. And we grow up, we change, people around us change, but oftentimes we don't change the tactics we use to influence a situation. And so I was given a framework to think about a number of years ago where it was just a list of influence tactics. And the guidance was, if you're in a situation and you're stuck, right? Don't stay stuck. Look at this list and pick a different tactic at random.
Right.
Perhaps something that is like very uncomfortable or not a tactic you would choose to use, and just try it out, right? And so this is an example of something I do where it's like, if I'm in a stuck situation, I'll just literally generate a random number, pick a different influence tactic and try it out. And oftentimes that helps get the situation unstuck. But so that's a concrete example, but I think that like the deeper principle that I really believe is, as like engineers, as technical folks, like build those technical skills for sure. You need those no matter what, but don't stop there. Also find, whatever you want to call them, soft skills, non-technical skills, whatever it is, like pick a few and build those too. And it's those skills that are probably going to lead to more opportunities for you as an individual, in a team, in a company, whatever you choose to do.
Right. Thank you for summing that up. But are there any like specific, maybe a point or two that you would recommend a new graduate to keep in mind coming into the industry to actually implement this? Now, looking back, I'm sure you have a much more clear understanding of what those few points were that actually benefited you in the long run.
I think one thing that's important to do is life in general is a team sport, kind of ultimately, right? You're doing it with other people. And so I think as a new grad, but I still do this myself, this isn't something I did as actively when I was younger, and I wish I did. I think one thing that's worth doing is to, on some cycle, once every 3 months, once every 6 months, this sort of thing, think about the technical skills, the soft skills, the things that you have some internal energy and heat and passion about being better at, right? And look around you, right? At your immediate team, at the leaders around you, whoever it happens to be. And see if you can't identify one or two people that you think are modeling a few of those skills that you would like to build, right? And a lot of the time, I think we get stuck perhaps a little bit on like overly formal mentorship programs or things like this, where a lot of the important learning in life, I think, happens just informally, right? With people that you have a good relationship with. And so I think one of the best ways to grow like throughout is think about, what are some ways that you want to grow, and look around and who's kind of doing those things well. And then don't be afraid to just reach out, right? And what's not surprising, maybe it's a little bit surprising, but what's not surprising is that most people that care about doing a certain thing well, if you show up and you're like, I've been kind of observing this situation and I wish I was better at this certain type of thing. And, you're modeling a lot of these ways to approach it or solve it that seem to work well. Just like start to make space to build a relationship with that person. And it works better when it's not transactional, I think, and when it's not kind of like, I need to learn like these specific things, but just build relationship and just kind of like observe and soak and this sort of thing. It doesn't have to be formal, doesn't have to be transactional. But it's those, it really is, it's those relationships where you start to connect on a more meaningful kind of personal level with other folks around a shared passion or a shared skill, a shared practice. Those are the things that I think, not not right away and in no guaranteed way, but in kind of a very natural, organic way over time, end up opening those doors that let you grow in ways that are going to be really good for you, and with the support of others. Because the other thing that I think is interesting about upskilling or changing as a person is oftentimes we can only change as much as the people around us are willing to accept or digest, right? And so it's helpful to, if you do want to grow or change in a certain way, it's helpful to find someone who's maybe a little further down the road, who can kind of resonate on that with you, see it in you, and help make space, like in that context, for that whole group to see you in a different way, to let you grow in that way.
And I think these are the points that you just made aren't, I would say, unorthodox in any way. These are some things I feel we're, in a sense, brought up with, or that we learn along just growing up. But once we're put into these technical roles, it gets so
there's like busy. Less busy and less space for it, right?
Right, less space for it, and your mind is completely shifted on a technical level. And so thank you for making these few points that may really help new graduates.
Yeah. I also think kind of regardless of our role, what we're doing, one thing that I wish I had started to do more earlier, that I really love doing now, is just taking a few minutes or more, like on the weekend, to like you said, to just like pop out of the spin loop, the busy loop, kind of the grind,
right,
and just doodle or journal a little bit, really with the intention of like just kind of like take everything that's in your head and just kind of like set it aside for a second and just be open, right, about where you're at, what's working, what's not working, this sort of thing. And so I think it's important to do that just personally in life, but I think it's also really important to, like in a team or a company, there are just realities in a team or a company or school or anything of like deadlines, hard work, all the stuff that's happening, right? And it's just really easy to go heads down and just kind of grinding through it. But taking this, just pausing every so often, taking a deep breath, like popping up, looking up and around, checking in with the people around you, get them to pause for a minute, look up and around. Like, it doesn't require a huge amount of time or effort or investment to do a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. I think the challenge that you're pointing out is that too often it stops happening at all. Right. And so being intentional about making a little bit of space for it is really all we need. It's kind and I think with a lot of these things, like skill building and other things, like you don't build skill in something in a binge overnight. You build skill in something by consistent small investment over time, right? Again, because like any system, like our bodies, each other, relationships, like things in general can't adapt to radical change immediately. It's got to be bite. But so like with a lot of these things we've been talking about, like, thinking about like beyond kind of core technical skills, adjacent skills that are important, making a little bit of space to practice those, working on the fact that like building things with other people is more than just your local craft. It's also communicating with them, solving complicated issues with them, just making a little bit more space for like the relational part of all of it. Doesn't have to be like 90% of the time, but it should be like, some percentage of the time. And just doing that is the important thing, and it's easy to forget. And so just kind of making it a discipline and making it fun.
Thank you for adding to those few points that you had mentioned previously. I want to ask you a bit of a unique question per se. let's say 24-year-old version of you was just standing right there and watching you and how you're answering these questions and where you are now in your life.
Yeah.
Could you have ever believed that you would be in this place? I'm sure your family is also really proud of where you've brought yourself up till now. And I'm sure you're only going to further your progress from here. And I also want to know, how do you feel about your progress, and how do you feel about all that you've done for yourself?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's like the short answer is, if there was a 24-year-old version of myself standing here looking at this as like a multiverse theoretical future, I wouldn't have believed it for a second. I just wouldn't have believed it for a second. I think, like in my case, I think the way life works out is such a mystery, such a crazy mystery. There's this parable that I was told many years ago, and you might have heard this. Other people might have heard this, but it's the parable of the Chinese farmer. And so it's this guy in China back in the Five Kingdoms period, way back, right? And he has a little ranch in this little teeny village, and he has one horse and farm animals and stuff. And the horse escapes from its corral and runs off into the woods. And the villagers show up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you lost your horse. You have the worst luck," right? And he's like, "Who knows if this is good or bad luck?" And a few days later, the horse comes back from the woods, and it's brought back with it a bunch of wild horses. And they all end up in the corral, and suddenly the farmer has this like small herd of horses, and the villagers show up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're the luckiest person ever." And he's like, "Who knows if I'm the luckiest person ever?" And his son's out there trying to break the horses so that they can be ridden and do stuff. And his son gets bucked and horribly breaks his leg. And the villagers show up and they're like, "You have the worst luck," right? And this just repeats, right? But I think just in general, definitely more so now than when I was 24. When I was 24, I think I had a much more fixed view of like, when things in life happen to me, I was like, this thing is a bad thing, or this thing is a good thing, right? At this point, I don't think of that at all. I just think, oh, this happened. Who knows if it's good or bad? Because honestly, who knows if it's good or bad? Like, the universe has no concept of good or bad. That's something we kind of lay on with stories and value assignments and things like this. But so anyways, some things in life obviously are more pleasant or more effective than other things, right? And so I think for myself, kind of going back to like inputs and outputs and all this other stuff, I think I've always like the way I've thought has always been kind of like systems based, and is it kind of toward a healthier system or a less healthy system based on some kind of like observable or measurable aspect. And so I think I've kind of intuitively in my life, I've moved toward things that have felt like better rather than worse options. But the other thing also that is really important to keep in mind, and we've touched on this as well with like teamwork and relationships and stuff like this, is like the way my life has worked out is, there's some small part of it that's under my direct control, but most of it isn't, right? Like, here at Udemy, we're working with hundreds of other engineers all over the planet, right? And so there's a part of it that's in my control, but most of it actually is not in my control, right? And so the other thing that I think, actually perhaps the thing that I would have been most surprised about when I was 24, looking at us now, is when I was 24, like I told you, I grew up as a kid. I was very kind of shut down, not very relational, all these things. I think what I would have believed least about this reality is that I'm in like a meaningful relationship with so many people, right? Which is actually kind of the fundamental thing that's led to a lot of the role changes for me in the last 5 to 10 years. And so certainly, members of my family are proud of how things have worked out. I'm certainly incredibly grateful about how things have worked out. There's no guarantee, right? It's like I could have done all the same things, but life is probabilistic, it's stochastic, it's timing, it's all these other things going on. And so I could have done all the same things and had a much better outcome or much worse outcome, and like other branches of the multiverse, who knows? But like what just is more and more clear to me at this point is how essential like inputs and outputs are, like not just mechanically, but also just in terms of like how we care about each other and how we support each other, right? And you do that, and most of the really incredible things that have happened in my life are like, certainly, yeah, I'm showing up, I'm doing some things, but I think in all honesty, it's much more about, like we were saying earlier, kind of people a little bit further down the road than me that saw maybe a hint of how I could be a little bit different, and I wasn't yet. And they're like, you know what, we're gonna lift you up and we're gonna put you over here, and you're gonna have to grow in all these weird ways, and we think you can do it. And then you're like, I'll try it out, and you do, right? And so, yeah, so I think the whole story is actually much more about the context and the people that you connect to that support you than it is about you.
Thank you for giving such a natural answer to that, because I feel a lot of people wouldn't even have this kind of a reflection on themselves. And that's very, of course, wise of you to be, I suppose, vulnerable in a sense.
Well, one thing that I hadn't thought about until just this moment, based on your question, is, it's been a while since I was in school.
Uh-huh.
And you're in school,
right,
working with us on a break. When I think back to when I was in school, there's you can build a relationship with classmates and with teachers and things like that, but it's also kind of like shorter run, right? You're only with a group of classmates in a cohort for a little bit of time and things like this. So it's hard for things to really build over time.
Right.
Like you were asking, like going from school into industry right at the start, like what's kind of the rethink that is worth doing at that point. When I think about school is very much about individual effort. It's not about team. It's really not about team effort, right? It's about you building kind of like some baseline foundational core skills, some capability, and being like summatively assessed on whether or not you can do kind of the mechanical thing, right? Which is important. But what's much more important in real life and work is not that, but how you accomplish hard things with other people. And so the other thing that I think took me a long time to learn, and I'm still learning it every day, is that like in school, it's so much about individual effort, individual achievement. But that's a heavy weight, right? That's a lot to carry. It's actually a lot more fun and effective in life to support other people and be supported by other people and accomplish it together rather than carrying it all yourself. And I think the 24-year-old, like I was saying, what would be really surprising, I think, for 24-year-old Seth to see me now is I feel like my life is lighter than it was back then. Because back then I was really heavy, and it's like it's very self-centered. It's about you and your effort and not being good enough or being too good or whatever is going on, right, for you as an individual. Where I feel like the kind of the bigger changes in the progress for me have been like, how do you let go of yourself more and hold on to others a little bit more and do it together?
That was very wonderfully said. Thank you for explaining it in such a way. Before we wrap things up, I want to ask you, what would you advise young engineers out there or soon to be engineers, maybe just a few points or words that you may have for them to be successful and to ensure that they're happy with the work they do and the career they choose?
I think if you're going into engineering right now, there's a lot of stuff in the press about, okay, AI is here and engineering is going to go away. I don't think that's true. I think that there's a story from like way back, early computer science, like early computers with punch cards. And I forget exactly who this was, but like a very important early computer scientist. So he works on an algorithm on paper, and he converts it to punch cards, and he goes to the computer and he runs his program, and it crashes. And what I remember about the story is, you know, he was thinking that his career was going to be one thing, like beautiful ideas, give it to the machine, and magic happens. And he realized in that moment, wow, actually, my career is going to be about debugging. And I thought that was, when I first heard it, I thought it was funny, and I thought it was true because that was my experience as well. But what I think is really interesting about like being an engineering student right now and moving into industry is, more than any other point in history, I feel like computer science, software engineering has, at root, it's always been about communication. It's about developing a story and giving it to a computer that kind of acts as like the actor or the actors of the story, plays it out, right? And when you don't tell the story very well, the outcome's bad, it crashes. Right. Now, what's interesting with computer science, with programming, is you can iterate on that very quickly, right? And what I think at this point is, when you're iterating on it, you're actually iterating on the clarity of your communication. And so as all of our tools become capable of talking to us, responding to visual input and output the way we do, what I think is going to be really interesting is I think that engineering is going to look more and more like just very clear, effective communication. And so as an engineering student, I think you and others are not just positioned to be able to communicate with our tools and our machines and our systems in a very good way, but I also think that, like with prompt engineering, with other things, I think that it's actually going to give engineers practice in communication that's actually going to just naturally bleed over to all these adjacent skills like teamwork and collaboration and things like this. Like, I think engineers are going to have kind of like superpowered communication skills because they're going to be practicing it all the time to debug the program, right? But then you can just use it with your friends, your family, your teammate, whatever. And you've gotten really good at expressing ideas clearly, which is super cool.
Right, right. I think that's very well said. And thank you for sharing such wise words and advice for all the young engineers out there. I want to say thank you, Seth, for coming on to my Beyond the Stack series. And I'm really honored that I got to start this off with you. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I appreciate it as well. Thanks.
Thank you.